What's up, you guys? Welcome back. If you are new, my name is Jess. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Today's video, we're going to be talking about parole raids, parole statistics, my view on parole, and all of that. But before we get into it, I just have to say I'm not glorifying breaking the law. I'm not saying do this. I am sharing these stories with you guys in the hope that you will learn from my mistakes and just hear what I have to say about it. I did not follow the rules and regulations of probation or parole until my last bid, and I kind of have to learn everything the hard way. And all of the things that I'm telling you when it comes to parole, I definitely learned the hard way, and it was really, really tough, not only for me, but it's tough for so many others. So please go into this video with an open heart and an open mind. And before we get into it, I want to show you guys something. I found something the other day when I was cleaning out my closet. I wanted to throw a bunch of stuff away, I wanted to downsize, and when I was cleaning out my stuff, I found my prison shirt. It says 711-548, and it also has my number in the, or has my name in the collar. You guys, these are shirts that you would buy on commissary. And you go up to the window and they're like, oh, you ordered a shirt, okay. They have a little number stamper, they stamp your number on it and then give it to you. Everything has to have your number on it. And when I first got out, when I first came home, I couldn't afford anything and I would still have to sleep in my prison sweatpants and my prison shirts. And that, to me, at first, I was so upset over it. I was so down on myself because I couldn't afford pajamas and I couldn't afford extra things. So it got to the point where, like, for a few weeks, I was still wearing my prison sweatpants and my prison shirt. I remember just being really sad about it and really frustrated with my situation. And then, like, I just woke up one day and thought, you are so blessed. You are so blessed to at least have clothes to wear. You are doing so good. You are not using drugs. You are trying to get your daughter back. This is just a reminder. And at that point, I was still on parole, which technically means I was property of the state still. So a lot of people, when they come home, they immediately throw away their prison stuff, and I get it. Some people think it's bad luck, like, bro, breaking the law is bad luck, okay? Sure, it's not bad luck. That's just my personal opinion. And I remember just being really upset, but then realizing how grateful I was. So I am gonna throw this away today, but I did wanna show it to you guys because I think when we're in our struggle and we're in our addiction, we fail to see how far we've come. We only see how far we have to go. And this, to me, is just an amazing reminder of how far I've come. I don't need it anymore, so I am going to throw it away. But again, I'm so grateful looking at that because I've come so far. Okay, without further ado, here is parole raids. Now, this story took place all the way back when I was 18 years old, maybe 19. And I was with my boyfriend, Randy, who I talk about a lot. Reese and I actually decided to film with Randy so that you guys can see his story and hear what he has to say about prison and his addiction. So that will be coming in the next couple of months. But I was with Randy. I was 18 or 19, and we were both on paper. He was on parole. I think at this point I was on felony probation. And he had a separate apartment. I had an apartment with my friend Janet, and he had an apartment of his own. So we could not spend the night together because parole does raids. And by raids, I mean, like, they come in the middle of the night, 2, 3 a.m., pounding on the door, and they want to search everything, check to see if you're there, all of that, which can be really stressful for anyone, for your family, for everyone involved. So I knew that I could not stay with Randy at his apartment, which is like a little studio apartment. Well, one night I decided, you know what, screw it. I want to sleep next to my boyfriend. I'm not going to go home. I'm going to stay here. And at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, we heard this crazy pound at the door. I immediately knew that was parole. I just knew cops knock a very specific way. Not that parole officers are cops, but you know what I'm saying. They pound on that door really, really hard. So I jumped out of my sleep and he jumped up. And the way his apartment was, and I will show you guys when I go back to my hometown in a couple of months, his apartment was on the top floor of this restaurant. Was it a restaurant? I feel like it was a restaurant. So there was apartments above this restaurant, and outside of his window was rooftops. And 3 buildings down, maybe it was 2 or 3 buildings down, there was an apartment building. So I could just go out his window and walk 2 or 3 buildings down on the rooftops, you guys, and go down into this apartment building. And the apartment building had stairs and would lead down to Main Street in Sydney. So I had done that a couple of other times, but at this point it was like January, February, there was ice, there was snow. I did not want to go outside in pajamas and freaking walk on the rooftops. I could have fallen. I mean, it was really easy to do in the summer, but it's not something you want to do in winter in New York. So, but it was a really genius plan that I could just walk down the apartment building stairs and then come out a different building than parole went into. I could go home, no harm, no foul, right? So this particular time, I just didn't do that. I said, you know what, screw it, open the door. Because they had been knocking on the door for a minute, right? And I'm just like, just open the door. So they open the door, they're like, parole, turn on the lights, and they're like in our face, and they're like, we're gonna search everything. So I was a little bit nervous, and I was also kind of banking on the fact that the parole officers wouldn't recognize me because Randy was on parole, I was on a felony probation. It is the same office, but I was just kind of hoping they didn't see me or they didn't recognize me. One of the parole officers kind of smirked at me, and they're like, let me get your name. And I gave my friend's name and my friend's information so that I didn't give them my information, because if I give you my information, if I tell you I'm Jessica, you're gonna know that I'm on felony probation. So like, we're gonna search the place, I give him the name, and he kind of smiles, he kind of smiles at me like I feel like he recognizes me, and I still know what this guy looked like. I remember his name. He was really cool. So they're like, Randy, we're gonna search the premises, da da da. And they're like kind of talking crap. They're kind of messing things up. And I wanna say 2 days prior to this, I got Randy hooked up with about a pound of weed because he couldn't find a job and he was trying to hustle to survive, right? Had to pay rent, had to eat, those kinds of things. And now I would not recommend this. I know it's so hard and it's so tempting, but you have to understand my mindset was completely different at this time. I mean, I'm 18, 19 years old, you guys. So my mindset was just awful, and I didn't even try to find a job. I'm sure Randy really didn't try that hard to find a job either. And we are from a small town with little opportunity, and no one wants to hire him. He is famous in a very bad way in our hometown. Everyone knows who he is. He's in the police blotter every single year. No one's gonna hire him. So it's a really tough situation. And I hooked him up with about a pound, like I said, and he had these tiles in his ceiling. Now in the tiles, he had put the weed in the ceiling. Now the parole officers are touching the ceiling with their little baton, or like people beater sticks, right? That's what I call them. So they're like touching the ceiling, and I'm sitting there, I'm kind of shaking, kind of freaked out, kind of like holding my breath and just trying not to look completely freaked out, which I don't do a really good job of hiding my emotions, to be real. So they're like touching it. I'm like, please don't fall down. Please don't fall down. Well, the parole officer gets to the tile where I know it is, and I'm like, just don't look at it. And I look over at Randy, and he's like, like, I know he's trying to like telepathically tell me, relax, but I can't. I just know if it falls out, he's going back to prison. I'm also gonna get arrested. They're gonna figure out I'm not really Janet. They're gonna know that I'm Jessica. So I'm sitting there like so tense and like shaking and like, oh my God, it's gonna fall out. So the parole officer touches the tile and puts it back down. And he does it again. And I'm like, oh my God, he's right on that tile. That weed is gonna fall, and it's gonna fall down. So then he moves to another tile, touches it, puts it down, goes back over to the first tile, and I'm like, this is it. We're done, going back to prison. Like, oh my God. So he touches it for the third time, you guys, and I just see him slowly put it down. He's like, and goes to the next one. And I thought, oh my God, we just totally got away with that. I mean, I was so, like, my heart's pounding out of my chest. I'm just waiting for that shit to fall on the ground. Like, how embarrassing, how crappy that we're gonna go back to jail for weed. It just was really bad. So luckily they did not find anything, and the one parole officer that recognized me said, have a good night, Janet. And he just said it like, girl, I know you're not Janet. But they weren't there for me. They were there for him, right? So they kind of just let it go, and they left. And I remember thinking, I can't believe that we just got away with that. I can't believe that I would allow you to have that in your apartment. This is so stupid. We have to get this out of here. And he told me, no, relax, it's fine. They're not gonna come back for a few weeks anyway. We'll get it moved. And I was like so concerned and worried that he was gonna go back to prison, but at the same time, we have to eat and pay rent, right? I was also at this point selling other things. I had other resources that I can't really talk about because I haven't formally been charged with a lot of things. So I want you guys to know that there's a huge chunk of my story missing. I can't tell you so much because, again, I haven't been formally charged with a lot of things, but I was doing other things at this time, and I was trying to keep Randy out of the mix, out of the hard stuff that I was doing. So anyway, the point of that story is I want to talk about parole because parole is just crazy. At this point in our country, about 70% of all inmates that leave prison will return to prison in the first 3 years upon release, That's a lot. That's a staggering number. And once you're in the system, it is really hard to break that cycle. It's really hard to stay out of the system, okay? So parole is really tough. The majority of people going back to prison are going back on technical violations. They're not committing new crimes. They're breaking curfew. They're failing drug tests. They are not finding employment. The really crappy thing about parole is that when you get out, you have parole fees. You have to pay to be on parole. Now, when I was on parole, that was $35 or $40 a month. I'm sure that has gone up since, I've been off of parole for a few years now. So $35 to $40 a month, that's not a lot, but it's just another bill on top of a lot of things. We're trying to eat, we're trying to get rent, we're trying to buy a car, we're trying to live our lives, right? If you're trying to do it the right way, another bill on top of that is really stressful. Now, on top of parole fees, you will have fines. Say you had restitution for something or whatever it is, whatever the case is, you are mandated by the court to pay your fines, okay? If you do have fines, whether that is legal fees or whatever. So if you do not pay your parole fees, you will go back to prison. If you do not pay your fines, you will go back to prison. If you don't get a job and you can't pay your fines and your fees, you will go back to prison. So it's like a money-making machine. Do you know how hard it is for a felon to get a job, you guys? It is hard. Now, a felon can probably get a job for minimum wage at McDonald's or whatever it is. In my situation, I got a job at a telemarketing company that paid, I think $7.50 or maybe $8 an hour. So I had to work a lot of overtime and I was just barely getting by. I was barely getting by, barely surviving. So really the point of the story is just to kind of shed light on parole and how hard it is for felons. Now, I had to work 2 jobs when I first came home. I got the telemarketing job and that job was really lenient. I could come and go as I pleased. And by that, I just mean like I could work as many hours as I wanted. And then I worked at my second job that was structured. I had a schedule. I would work maybe 6 to 8 hours at a vapor store. And then I would leave work at the vapor store, I want to say around 5 p.m. Well, instead of going home, I went to the telemarketing job from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. and just get an extra 5 hours. I was literally working all day, every single day, because that is what it took. So yes, parole is really hard. Yeah, it's really hard to build a life outside of that world, outside of drugs, outside of criminal life. It's really hard. It is not impossible. You just have to want it more than anyone else. And I know I say it to you guys all the time, but I want you guys to understand something. We need to change the system, first of all. Second of all, we need to be preparing inmates for the outside world. We need them to understand that it's gonna be hard. You're gonna hit obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. You're gonna have to work 10 times harder than anyone else. You're just gonna have to want it more, like I said. But in order for us to see change in the prison system, we need to shake it up. It needs to be radical change. Now, I know New York is talking about not putting people back in prison for technical violations. That's amazing if that happens. It's a step in the right direction. Every state needs to follow that as well, and we just need support systems. Now, if there's anyone watching this video that's like, why, who cares, they're criminals, they committed crimes, it benefits society to let someone out of prison that is rehabilitated, that is stable, that does not have PTSD. Because right now the rates with inmates that have PTSD mirror that of war veterans, okay? So they are not coming out of prison stable, happy, rehabilitated people, ready to take on the world. They're not people that are energized for more, not in every situation. We're putting people back on the street that are broken. People that have no idea how to live outside of prison, people that are institutionalized, people that never got help with their addictions, because over half of all inmates struggle with some form of addiction. So it's beneficial to society if we rehabilitate criminals, drug addicts, people that made a mistake. If we rehabilitate those people, it's better for society to have less people breaking the laws just to survive. I can't even tell you how many people I know that paid their parole fees with drug money because they couldn't even find a job. We've got to break that stigma. We've got to hire felons, and we need radical change if we want to see radical change. We have 2.5 million Americans in jails and prisons today. That is insane. That is insane. That number, if you go back and look at 1980, before the war on drugs took place, you're gonna see some dramatic climbs in the charts, okay? So without boring you guys with statistics and all of that, I'm gonna end it here. I just want to have this conversation with you guys. I want to talk about parole. I want to talk about the things that I wish to see in the world, the change I wish to see. Hopefully I've inspired you guys to take a step back and just look at it from someone else's perspective. So like I said, I'm going to end it here. I love you guys. Stay safe, stay sober, do not break the law, and I will see you in my next video.